Hello there guys, what is going on? It's Monday, back here again for another episode of Added Time, answering your questions that you kindly submitted for today's show. Got quite a few to get through. Thomas Tuchel surrounding HAKIM ZIYECH as well. Before we get into any of that good stuff, a big week on the channel with some big games to talk about as well. Atletico Madrid on Wednesday, also the FA Cup quarter-final next Sunday against Sheffield United. So make sure you don't miss any of the uploads this week on the channel by hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell. Also hit the like button because it helps out the channel as well. Let's get into your questions. So first, we got two questions about HAKIM ZIYECH. Got quite a few questions actually about ZIYECH, so I wanted to sort of match them together. So firstly, Jonathan Mann asking, how can we accommodate ZIYECH in this Tuchel system? And the second one from Neo, in a similar way, ZIYECH has been struggling in the current system Tuchel has been playing. Do you think the right wing back role could work for ZIYECH, as he could stay out wide and possibly get more space to ping in crosses, etc.? So ZIYECH has been struggling recently. He started again on Saturday against Leeds, didn't have the best game. I feel on both of these questions, the right wing back role, I'm not entirely sure, because in some case you could say and look at the way the right wing back is sort of playing for Thomas Tuchel so far, especially in games where Chelsea are a lot more dominant, like on Saturday. We've seen Callum Hudson-Odoi as well, really pushing up the pitch. But I just think ZIYECH's game isn't quite made for that. I think you need someone with pace, mobility, and the ability to get back as well. I don't really think we see that within ZIYECH's game. I think ZIYECH, for me, looks a little bit lost at the moment in this system. I think when he was playing under Lampard, he became the creative sort of hub for Chelsea, and it was a short period of time because then he got injured. But that's when you saw the best of ZIYECH, because he was able to float in and out of positions. I think there was a sense that he had that creative role. The creativity in Chelsea's team was predominantly coming down the right. Him and Reece James had such a great chemistry. The way Reece would overlap, the way HAKIM ZIYECH would sort of drift into central areas, drift further back. I think the Sheffield United game back in November is probably the best example of what ZIYECH does when he has the opportunity and space to sort of influence a game. He's had injury. He hasn't really been a guaranteed starter. I don't think he's been a player that's benefited from Tuchel's constant rotation. I think the fact that this is a guy who hasn't played tons of football over the last year, I don't think really has helped him, on top of that moving to a new country. As I've constantly said, I think it's silly to dismiss what ZIYECH did earlier in the season. It's not like we haven't seen the best at Chelsea. The unfortunate thing is, I think, like a lot of players this year in this team, hasn't done it consistently enough, and also has had some injury issues too, which hasn't helped his case. I do think he looks lost, because I think in this system, with the counter press, with the way Tuchel is playing players in between the lines, I think he needs faster players in his front three. ZIYECH, you saw it on Saturday once again, where the sort of positions he likes to occupy, I don't think are really there, or at least what he's being instructed to do, I don't think he's really getting the best out of his game. Despite the nature of a roaming 10, you sort of associate ZIYECH in that role, but unfortunately at the moment he's not really doing that, and I think he's almost at times playing too far up, I think, to really influence the game. I think when he was playing as the right winger in the 4-3-3 under Lampard, I think he had much more sort of license to drift further back, and I think that was helping him alongside Reece James, who isn't also a guaranteed starter week in, week out, and I think those two have a really good partnership. So I think it's been difficult for ZIYECH. I don't really want to make any massive conclusions about players at the moment, because I think we have to wait till the end of the season. I think I'm probably guilty of this as well, of being quite premature about players and saying this is going to happen, that's going to happen. Do we question their future? I still think ZIYECH, like Pulisic, like other players, whether they actually get this time or not, I think you have to give them a second season as well. I think the worrying thing is for ZIYECH, as a 27-year-old in the prime of his career, it's a little bit different to Kai Havertz, to Timo Werner, to Christian Pulisic. Younger players who you still think have got a lot of way to go in terms of their development. I think ZIYECH, the great thing about him was, at least earlier in the season, you felt this was a ready-made player who's sort of gone through sort of that development process, but it's difficult. I think that there have been cases of older wingers coming into the club, like Pedro. If you remember, he had quite a tricky season in 15-16, and then in 16-17 under Antonio Conte, he had his best season as a Chelsea player and really settled into the club there. So the same could happen for ZIYECH. It's not the case that because he's an older player, he can't settle into the league. So I think Pedro may be a good example, particularly for ZIYECH, but of course not the same profile of player, but I think maybe that could be an example. Just because he has a sticky first season, he could get better. Hasib asks, should Giroud start versus Atletico Madrid. I think any attacker could start in that front three at the moment, to be honest, with the exception of course Mason Mount's going to be suspended on Wednesday, which I think is a big miss. Giroud of course scored the goal in the first game, a spectacular overhead kick, and I think that would influence a lot of people's thinking, alongside as well the type of opposition it is. I think Atletico will need to commit more men forward in this game naturally, but I still don't think they're going to shy away from their natural instinct to be more reactive on the counter. I think Chelsea still will have a lot of the ball. I'd be quite stunned if, especially in the first half and the first half an hour, if Chelsea aren't dominating possession, just based on the natural sort of characteristics of both sides with Tuchel and Simeone. I think Giroud can be a very good player in this situation. I have to say though, I haven't been overly impressed by Olivier Giroud, and I haven't been overly impressed by a lot of the attackers recently, in terms of I can absolutely tell you this guy's going to start, this guy's going to be the guaranteed starter, because you watch Olivier Giroud and you'll think he's that guy, and then you watch Tammy Abraham, who's had a good game this season, you think that's the guy for us up front. You watch Kai Havertz, we've seen Timo Werner at times. It's tough to really nail down one player. I do think Giroud could be used in this situation to hold up the ball and link with, say, Kai Havertz, for instance, behind him, Ziyech, Pulisic, Callum Hudson-Odoi, especially. I think Callum Hudson-Odoi and Giroud, I think, have a nice chemistry, so I could see that potentially if Callum was to play on the left or the right. We'll have to wait and see, or maybe Tuchel just sticks with the false nine once again, as Kai Havertz as his focal point, and then two sort of Roman 10s or wingers behind him. Byron asks, is Tuchel's rotation policy essential for freshness, or is it negatively impacting the team's rhythm? It seems like some players need a consistent run of games to produce their best form. I do agree with this. I think there are some players who do need consistent run of minutes. I think, Pulisic and Ziyech fall into this category instantly, just based on the lack of game time they've had consistently this season. Other players too. Obviously, if you have a run of 5 or 6 games in a row, I think it's going to be better, obviously, than being a sort of a bench player week in, week out. And despite there being some players who you could argue are sort of impact players, like Christian Pulisic, for instance, I still think he needs more game time. So it's tough. And I think that this is the difficulty Tuchel has with such a big squad. He says he likes the big squad. If you look at his career, he's famed for rotation as well. This is a guy who does change his 11 frequently. It's not the case that can't work. We look at Pep Guardiola, who frequently changes his starting 11. So I think it's not the case that this sort of a methodology can't work at Chelsea. I just think for his case, I think there are some players who have different sort of struggles this season, whether that be fitness, whether that be form. I think Tuchel's starting to understand his squad a little bit more. I think he's been really pragmatic in a short space of time. I think we're going to get a lot more answers about who he trusts and who he doesn't. I think at the start of next season, when he has a full pre-season to sort of go by, maybe some new signings too. I think that's why, for me, at least for January to May, I think it's very difficult to judge based on some players who may not have a long-term future here and may just be being used for the time being by Tuchel because the players at his disposal, basically. So I think it's difficult to really tell. I think there are some players who could benefit from a run of games, but if they don't perform, is Tuchel going to keep playing them? That's the issue as well, because people will criticise Tuchel and criticise players if they aren't scoring instantly. So that's an issue and something to balance as well, game by game. Matthew Lee asks, how good has Rudiger been under Thomas Tuchel so far? Another excellent performance against Leeds United. Absolutely, Rudiger. I think it's between Rudiger, Kante and Mendy for who you felt was sort of the best performer on Saturday. For me, I felt Rudiger was outstanding. He really was. I think he was flawless in truth. I think everything that came into the box, especially physicality-wise, heading the ball away, I thought he was wonderful. Chelsea defensively were immaculate once again on Saturday. I thought the way he brought up the ball at times, trying to be that offensive player too. I just think Rudiger has really impressed me. I think I said this weeks back regarding all the speculation surrounding Rudiger. And I said that it's really down to the players to perform. I think they have to prove themselves now. If they were upset that they weren't a guaranteed starter or getting more minutes earlier in the season, it's now up to them to prove themselves. And Rudiger has been one of those players. I think maybe it suits a back three better than a back two for Rudiger. I have seen him play well in a back two for Maurizio Sarri, but I think the levels he's maintaining now alongside Andreas Christensen, I think is wonderful to see. I did say a year ago I felt that Rudiger was Chelsea's best centre-back. Rudiger, it's wonderful to see any player that you feel could have been out the door. I think Rudiger at times can be a wonderful presence in the dressing room. I think he is a lovable player as well. I that's why he's been one of my favourite players in recent years. So it's great to see him back to his best. I think the contract situation is quite interesting. regarding him not having tons of time left, seeing how he does, whether he does sign a contract extension or maybe waits, given the frantic nature of this club, which I think Rudiger, as a Chelsea player for 3 or 4 years now, will know and come accustomed to, given whether he's in favour now, will he be in favour at the start of next season. So I think he'll maybe be a little bit more patient, but given how he's performing at the moment, I think he's one of the guaranteed starters. I think Rudy, Christensen, especially Dave as well, those three have really worked well together. When Thiago Silva comes back, I spoke about this yesterday with Jay McIntosh, I think it's going to be a difficult decision for Thomas Tuchel to make, and I actually think that Dave may be the one to drop out instead of Rudiger or Christensen. In my opinion, Rudiger has done so well and it's great to see. And finally, Harris asks, how do you rate Tuchel's season so far and how do you see him staying at this club beyond his 18-month contract agreement? For the second part of that question, mate, I can't answer because we know what Chelsea are like, and I'm not going to go into thinking about long term here. I think we have to just think about the next few games, think about the rest of the season, and then we can look forward to next season. Chelsea is a predictably unpredictable club. You look at the history of Chelsea of coaches, and this is pre-Roman. This was an astonishing stat I found out recently. Sort of even pre-Roman, Chelsea don't keep managers for longer than 18 months. The expected life for a Chelsea coach for a long time in our history now has been 18 months, which I think tells you a lot about just the DNA of Chelsea Football Club. Doesn't matter if an owner comes in or not. It's just the way things are. So I think it's very hard to tell what Tuchel's future will be beyond this season, beyond next season as well. Lots of things can change. So I think this season has proved that once again for Chelsea fans. I think in terms of what he's done so far, I think you have to be impressed. I think the way he picked up that squad, the pragmatic way he's integrated players, got the best out of them, especially outclassed players like Andreas Christensen, Rudiger. The midfield situation for me probably is the most impressive, given Chelsea's inability to defend transitions and my belief there isn't really a perfect solution there. I think it is maybe hindering our attacking play, especially having someone progressive from deep that can, and especially maybe an extra man in attack that maybe is hindering our attacking play. But I think the way he's utilised Jorginho, Mateo Kovacic, and N'Golo Kante back to his best, I think that's the most impressive thing. And he's got some big results. Tottenham away, a massive result for Chelsea and for Chelsea fans. Winning at Liverpool for the first time in 7 years, massive as well for me. That's probably our biggest result of the season. I loved that result, and the performance of it was wonderful too. And you can see where it can go in the future. I think guessing what happens in the future, at least for me, and I've done it before on this channel, I think is a fool's game at Chelsea, especially regarding the head coach. But let's hope he has a really strong end to the season. This is a defining week for Chelsea, I think. The Champions League second leg, it'd be a massive result if we can get past Atletico and into the last 8, and that gives you massive excitement for where Chelsea could go in the Champions League, because it's luck of the draw. We don't know what happens in the Champions League from there. Chelsea could do something wonderful and go beyond sort of our expectations in the Champions League this year, and the FA Cup, which I think is massive too. I think people maybe forget the FA Cup. I think that's massive. But that is it for this edition of Added Time. Thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch it. If you did enjoy it, hit that subscribe button and a notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter at SonOfChelsea. Have a great day, and I'll see you again.